We have a very special multidisciplinary program today, some conversation, some reading, a little film at the end, and of course your questions. Today we are honored to have exhibition curator Achim Hochdörfer here to join us in this conversation with the artist about his artistic beginnings and career. Hochdörfer is curator at the Museum Moderner Kunst Stiftung Ludwig in Vienna. His exhibition and publication projects include Jeff Wall, Photographs, 2003, Cy Twombly, 2009, and Tacita Dean, The Line of Fate, 2011. He has written widely about contemporary art in magazines and journals such as Art Forum, Text der Kunst, and Camera Austria. In spring 2013, he was appointed director of the Museum Brandhorst in Munich, a post he will assume this coming November. In addition to overseeing the catalog that accompanies Claes Oldenburg, the 60s, Hochdörfer is editor with Marcia Oldenburg and Barbara Schroeder of the newly published volume Claes Oldenburg, Writing on the Side, 1956 to 1969, a collection of the artist's key writings of the 1960s, which we'll be hearing more from soon, from Claes himself. We're delighted for this chance to welcome Claes Oldenburg back to the Walker stage, a place he has been before. And Achim, would you be so kind as to advance my first slide next to you? I wanted to make sure you all saw this wonderful picture. This is 1975, here on this very stage, Claes Oldenburg in conversation with then director Martin Friedman, on the occasion of Claes's retrospective called Claes Oldenburg's Six Themes. And we're delighted to have you back in this very spot, Claes. How to introduce Claes Oldenburg. You will find a more extensive and historically correct biography in your program notes, but to paint this remarkable career in broad strokes of his more than 60 years as an artist, one could say that Oldenburg has been, at once, a forerunner of performance and installation art, an elder statesman of American pop, a reinventor of sculpture, a master draftsman and printmaker, an eloquent writer, and a pioneer, along with his late wife and artistic collaborator Kosha van Bruggen, of art in the public sphere. His contributions to the history of art are many, and we are proud to be able to say very fondly that his history runs deep here at the Walker Art Center, in our collections, in our exhibitions, and of course in the Minneapolis Sculpture Garden, where Spoonbridge and Cherry, the magical fountain sculpture he made with Kosha van Bruggen in 1988, holds court and delights visitors. We are thrilled to have him here with us today. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Achim Hochdörfer and Claes Oldenburg. And now the conversation. We begin in New York in 1958, yes, 57.
This is happening actually in 1960, but that's not far off.
But that's not far off.
But there is a big difference. Because,
yes.
Yeah, because 58, I was not working in this way, and that was a change.
Well, before we start, I mean, Achim and I thought it might be just interesting to hear your thoughts about this exhibition. We're now on the final venue of its tour. You've been talking about the 60s for the past year and a half at all the venues as we go through. How does it feel to see this material together, perhaps for the last time in this context?
Well, I like to see it. I was very interested in in helping to create an exhibition strictly about the 60s, which I think has always appeared to me sort of like a play. It starts out in a very joyful, positive way, and it ends in rather a mess with assassinations and people fighting and so on. So it has a kind of theatrical character to it, and I think that I lived through all those stages of the 60s, and they're depicted in the work. This is very early. This is the beginning. This is the having walked the streets of New York and picked up cardboard and turned it into a sign, that is to say, a street sign. I think you can see, I don't know if this one has Orpheum on it, but it's like a big street sign.
It does, yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So this is an environment you created,
yes, and
called the street.
This is a depiction of the environment in which I found myself in New York, which was the Lower East Side, where I had to go to have a studio because I couldn't afford other spaces in Manhattan. And this is a reconstruction of the street, and you'll see a child running, you see a dog barking, and you see a strange head up at the right, and you see little cars, and there's a guy, I think he's shooting somebody, and it's all a impression, a carried away kind of impression of the surroundings.
I mean, you came to New York in 1957, 58.
I arrived in 56, actually.
56, and you were living at the Lower East Side, so in a
That's when, well, I looked for a
tough
place
area.
until I found that, yeah.
And it was a situation which was very loaded, if you want so, or heated. It was abstract expressionism was somehow exhausted, and the desire for a new movement, for like young artists, a new generation which was coming up, I think was pretty. You could feel this atmosphere, and you jumped right into this like heated situation. Like Jasper Johns and Rauschenberg had their first breakthroughs in '58, and you had Alan Capro making the first happenings. And the street installation sort of absorbs all these different currents, and sort of tries to jump into this. In this.
I was so busy that I hardly had time to think about art.
I'll jump to this slide.
Yes, I mean, of course, this was it's intended to be art, but on the way to art, it passed through so many other things, and this is you saw the environment in the last slide, and then this is the environment animated by myself and my first wife, Patty Muha, and she's playing what we call the street chick, and we're both going to pieces, as you can see, and this was a very wild piece, and it was set it was set in the Judson Church, which was one of the first places to encourage the art of the time. And there were several performances, Capro and others and so on. This was among them. And I felt kind of good to get all that out of your system.
Well, so describe the materials that you were using for the objects and for the costumes and for this environment. You were not going to the art supply store. You were not buying paint.
That was one of the rules, is that everything would be found on the street, and or created from the materials found on the street, and that's what you see there. You can see Patty's headdress that's made out of, and it looks like an old sock that's stuffed with things. And then she has that face that's cut out of a newspaper and so on.
Mm-hmm. So now these objects, as they live in the gallery, are like this. So the street is traveling to the U.S. potentially for the last time. This is an incredibly important body of work, important body of objects. Do you want to talk a bit about how you two brought these together for this show? It was a difficult process to get them in the museum.
Well, it's an awfully clean version of the street.
It is. I'll say. This is the MUMOK presentation.
So now it's become art, you see.
It's become art. Well, these are all in the galleries upstairs and rarely travel, so it's a very incredible opportunity to see them all together. So this is all 1 year, 1960, that this is happening.
Yeah, this is all 1960, and that's called well, this is a head. This is called the head. That's made of newspaper dipped in paste and pasted on a screen of chicken wire. That's the piece on the left, and the one in the center is, of course, pure cardboard stuffed with newspaper, and that's called the Big Man. And then there's, at the end there, you'll see a piece that's not in the exhibition, but it's called the Empire Papa Raygun, which is also made in that paper method. It's hanging in the upper right corner there. And there were several pieces made like that. And they were also intended to swing as in the air, as you'll see upstairs.
I mean, one key word or issue of this time was the ray gun. And it's sort of a mythology, or...
Well, the ray gun was originally the name of... I wanted to start a gallery. I wanted to, come on the scene, and there were, one of the ways you could come on the scene was perhaps by opening your own gallery. And so I had designs for making a gallery called the Raygun Gallery, and I don't, to this day, quite remember where Raygun came from, but it's just one of those things that floated in the window during the night. And so I took that, and I didn't start a gallery. Instead, I was fortunate enough to come at a moment when the Judson Gallery was opening, and people like Tom Wesselman were there, and Mark Ratliff, and others. And so that was a great moment because we could build our gallery on our own terms.
So what does the ray gun term mean? What did it mean to you? It took on
Well,
very
there's a
symbolic
slogan. It's called
reference.
Annihilate, Illuminate. When ray gun shoots, no one dies. Those are two of the sayings of ray gun. Yeah.
Ray gun is a powerful force.
Yes.
Yes.
Ray gun is actually a form. It's basically a right angle. And what is a right angle? But right angle is gravity. And it's really it's about the essence of life, which is that gravity pulls you down and you have to resist. And you can resist by doing it in all kinds of different ways, like making figures and so on.
And gravity, of course, is a force we'll be seeing in many of your later
gravity
sculptures
plays
that
a big part of it.
So moving to the next year, you did open a sort of gallery, the store.
In fact, the store, which opened up in late '61, was a sort of a gallery indeed, but it was more of for me it was more of an artwork, but it was also a combination of studio and gallery, because I would work there during the day, and if someone dropped in and wanted to buy something, I would sell it and so on. And you could see it's quite crowded, and there's a lot to choose from. Most of which, fortunately, stayed here. There weren't very many sales. And the focus really wasn't on selling, and the focus was not even on making credible images of commercial things. The focus was on form and color. And the objects were used as the way of trapping these materials. And there's a lot of reference here, as you could see, to Jackson Pollock, for example. The treatment of paint as a three-dimensional thing, as a form in itself, is very important to these works.
So how did the store operate as a business, as a studio? You're the proprietor, but you were also the creator.
Well, it was in an area which, in those days, the Lower East Side wasn't known for art. It was just, a community, and this was next door to a delicatessen, and the people would go in the deli, and they'd look over there and say, I wonder what that is, but nobody came in, Now and then somebody who knew what that was would come in, and I had I remember a man who worked in Wall Street, and he would come up on his lunch breaks, and he would come in with a very fresh $100 bill. It looked like he had just made it, And he'd say, what can I get? And then we would put together some things, and he would take them, and I would take the $100 bill and wait for him to come back, and he would come back in a couple of weeks. So it was very informal. And dealers, of course, dropped in too, and they discussed the potential of the work, And no one had ever seen it before, so they weren't going to jump into it, And it was rather strange looking for its day.
Mm-hmm. And the objects themselves, which some of are upstairs in the galleries.
Yeah, this one is in the show, and it's based on a shirt that was shown that I saw in Cologne, and it's a solid piece. It's not a flat piece. It's a solid piece, maybe about a foot deep. And that, as you see, it means a lot more than just a shirt. And that was the whole point, is that everything that I would get a hold of, I would try to turn into a metaphor, or to suggest other things than what it really was, to expand the imagination, in other words, to suggest that invention could play a part in making more of what you saw.
I mean, the store is often referred to as the starting point of pop art, but we are used to think about pop art as something cold and cynical and like with hard edges, but the store is very different from this. It's very emotional and expressionistic.
The store. The only thing the store has in common with pop art is that it uses commercial images, but these images are. It's not about making fun of those images or putting them down. They're simply useful for me to make form, and so I didn't think of this as pop art, and I still don't. But of course, it gets lumped together, and I think pop art is also more inclined to be painting in a traditional style, or silkscreen, like Andy did, and so on. But here the whole thing is new. The surfaces are new. They're very strange, different kinds of surfaces. And it comes a long way from an image of something in a store.
I mean, talking about painting and transgressing painting, you were trained as a painter and practiced.
Yeah, I wanted to be a painter
in the 50s, and then at some point with the street, you transgressed painting. It went into something in between sculpture, painting, drawing. Environments which go into the space and are displayed around like a symphony with different motifs, and the store as well. It's like, but you could still, it's linked to painting. Like this skirt, I always have to think about de Kooning.
Oh yes, definitely. I mean, and I admired de Kooning, and I admired Pollock, and I admired anyone who was making beautiful painting from now to the beginning of time. It was a question of making it suitable to the moment, for my life in the moment, what I saw.
And sometimes they look like as if they would like get alive, like a painting. Some of these store objects look as if there is a rectangular and it just wants to like go into the space.
Yeah. And a lot of them are fragments. Pieces of things, as you could see here, things that have been sliced off or half-eaten, So there are many other pieces like that. This was one of the first ones.
So you began working in plaster with these, and chicken
these
wire
are all plaster,
and muslin.
Yeah, these are plaster. I love plaster because it'll do anything for you. It absolutely has no form in itself, and all you have to do is to give it form, and you can do anything with it. It's wonderful.
I mean, and like Pollock, you were using enamel from the hardware store.
This enamel from the hardware store, and I was lucky to be painting at a moment before lead was forbidden in paint, because lead has a lot to do with the color and also the lasting quality of the color.
In the very same space, then the store, you made happenings as well.
Yes, it's a long tale. I mean, there was first the store, and then that became a series of performances, which you'll see in the exhibition. And we don't have many of them here, but you could see them in action next door or upstairs.
So shortly after the store, how many months did it last as a
the store opened the 1st of December, 1961, and it closed sometime in January, mid-January.
And then you were invited to go to Midtown for another show at the Green
Yes,
Gallery.
then after that, Dick Bellamy, who was starting a gallery uptown, invited me to come up there and show. And I made an arrangement with him so that I could make pieces during the summer while the gallery was closed. The reason I wanted to do that was because I wanted to make larger pieces. And you could see them here, this kind of scale. And of course, then I had to go beyond plaster. I had to go into canvas. And so with Patty doing the sewing and me doing the painting, we created a show in 1962 at the Green Gallery, of which this is an example. You'll see the everything. Well, I don't think the calendar's not upstairs, but the other things are there.
So these are paintings on canvas.
They're paintings on canvas, and
they're
filled with boxes actually, and also with cloth, and so keeping it kind of light.
I mean, what I think is interesting is how this idea of objects, living objects, who behave in the space like it looks like the ice cone is somehow sleeping, or at least you can imagine it, and lead it to a certain kind of performative way of display, like the objects in the home section. You systematize this different presentation modes, like objects hanging on the wall, hanging from the ceiling, being on the floor. So as a visitor, you are activated somehow. You are in a space, and you don't want to look at one piece like contemplatively, but you want to see the relations between the pieces and walk around and think about differences in texture, size, color.
Yeah, it was a little bit like three-dimensionalizing painting. It was still painting, but it was being done in a sculptural way. It was combining the two, because I very much I like painting, but painting is too. It doesn't exist. You can't touch it. So I like to touch the things that I deal with, and so this was the solution to that. And fragments, of course, are a way of getting interesting, tearing things and so on. And so copying that is an interesting way of dealing with flat surfaces and making them more sculptural.
And softness was the moment which was introduced here in the.
This was the soft, yeah. Then things switched to soft sculpture. Really, it gradually became soft sculpture, and that was partly affected by the performance. Here you see a performance in the gallery, in the Green Gallery. That's Patty in the center. There's the hamburger on the left, and you see a number of people up there watching it or trying to understand what's going on. But it was not a performance with words. It was a performance with gestures and things happening. In other words, so that's why they call it happenings. And that had a lot to do with the soft sculpture that came afterwards.
Well, I think what Achim said a minute ago about the visitor is interesting to think about in terms of your shift in scale at this point. The body, the relationship of the body to the object becomes increasingly important, it seems, as you move into the 60s. The scale becomes larger, the materials become much more anthropomorphic.
Well, the great thing about soft sculpture is that you can move it. You can push it, you can pull it, you can get those wonderful tangible effects, and they'll actually be there. And you can put the sculpture down and when you go to bed at night, and in the morning you can take it and you can shake it and punch it, and then you'll have a different sculpture that day. This is one of the first vinyl sculptures, because it moved from canvas to vinyl, which was just coming in at that time. And was wonderful material that looked very hard. It looked metallic and yet was extremely soft.
So these objects were made as during a visit to Los Angeles, where
this was at the beginning of. I really found New York sort of exhausting in '63, and Patty and I decided to try Los Angeles. which at that time was relatively undeveloped and very interesting to go to because they had their own approach to art, and they weren't that much influenced by the East Coast. Mm-hmm. This was the biggest piece I made in Los Angeles, and it was sort of the culminating piece of the area of the home, which I gave all these things titles. There was the store, and then this was the home, which was the one about softer things. And Los Angeles is very much about homes. That's what people are doing most of the time, is building houses and furnishing them.
And then tearing them down and doing it all over again.
This happens to be the front room of the Sidney Janis Gallery, which was a famous room because that's where they had first shown de Kooning and Duchamp and Mondrian and many people. So that had a history. And you see that door over there, that's the door to Sidney Janis's office. And it says on it, private. And then you have pictures on the wall, which are really fabric, sort of pseudo Jackson Pollock fabrics. Then you have zebra, of course, and you have leopard. It's kind of based on a place in north of Malibu, which was a weekend spot you could go, and you could choose an apartment, and each apartment was a different animal. It had the zebra room, and the leopard room, and the tiger room, and so on. So this sort of brings Los Angeles together for me.
So the home included in
This environment, but it also included objects that were very much about this idea of something hard becoming soft, or
Right.
something utilitarian becoming useless.
Yeah.
Can you speak
And
a
what's
bit
the
about
hardest thing at home? It's the bathroom, right? Okay. So the bathroom also happens to be a white, which is very suitable for the vinyl, and the water it involves has the blue. So this was a perfect source for a sculpture. And I made a whole bathroom. This is just one of the pieces. There was also a bathtub and a washstand and a medicine cabinet and a scale and all of those things. All rendered in vinyl, all sewn by Patty. The getting to the sewing was always very complicated. The idea would begin with a cardboard model, and you see one upstairs of the bathtub. And that cardboard model then would be reduced to patterns, and then the patterns would be traced on canvas, and the first work would be done in canvas, and then if that, we make our corrections on that, and then finally proceed to the vinyl. So it was a long way to achieving the final result.
And the canvas version, you said it's a ghost version.
Yes, the canvas was called Ghost version because it looked like a ghost. It was just pure canvas.
I mean, like children would mimic a ghost.
Right, yeah.
But it has a certain uncanny, or it hints at least to a certain uncanniness of the whole project. I mean, think about white, like taking the color out of an object as if it would be naked. And the idea of a naked object is somehow
We're looking at the ghost fan, as you asked.
Yeah, well, the thing is that you're not looking at a toilet and you're not looking at a fan. You're looking at something else which has been made and needs definition and was produced by an intuitive process. And so it's one wants to suggest that as much as possible, you know. This is a ghost fan, for example, which is called that because of it's purely a canvas. This one was made in order to get to the vinyl fan again. Is that this is the next one. That's the vinyl fan. It was shown in the exhibition in Toronto, the World's Fair.
So at this point, you're in the
Or
mid-60s.
was it in Ottawa? I think it was Ottawa,
in
yeah.
Ottawa. The scale is, of course, much larger than the human at this point.
Oh yeah, the scale got bigger.
The scale got, the store objects were just a little larger than life, and as you moved into the 60s, 63, somewhere in the middle. And now at this point, it's quite overscaled.
Yeah.
And how did scale and that development sort of evolve for you?
Well, scale is a wonderful way of changing things, as everyone knows. When you're a little kid, you take your finger and you bring it closer, and it gets bigger, and you can't figure out why it gets bigger, because it feels like the same thing. And then it goes over here, and it gets smaller. And when you ponder these things that are very simple things that everyone lives with, you find them rather strange. And I found scale, when you made something large, it just transformed it completely. In this case, it's Park Avenue in New York, and this is taking the place of the building that we used to be known as the Pan Am building, and now it's known as the MetLife building, but it blocks Park Avenue, and in order to help the traffic along, I substituted this good humor bar. And the reason I chose that is because it has an opening in it's always shown with a bite taken out of it, so that people can get past into the other side. But you see, there is scale. I mean, you make it large, and you relate it to another scale, and you've got something new. You've got something that is, you can't take your eyes off sometimes.
Can you speak a bit about your drawing process and how that plays into your noodlings with the idea of scale? I mean, I know I see your notebook in front of you here. I know you carry it with you everywhere. And there are many amazing clippings in the show that show your superimposition of objects on top of postcards and other combinations where you can see you're really thinking about that.
Well, I mean, basically the reason I became an artist is because I was able to draw. And that started when I was quite young, and that's my way of speaking. And I think that might have been encouraged by the fact that I came from, originally I came from another country, and drawing was a substitute for learning the language, or part of learning the language. So drawing became very essential to me, and when I had tried to earn a living in different ways, like being a reporter and other things that didn't please me, I said the only thing I really should do is to fall back on my drawing, because there I could speak. And so drawing became the beginning of my career in art, and it is, of course, the essence of all of the things, because you've got to be able to depict things with a drawing, and convincingly, to have it accepted. And so drawing, but on the other hand, you can make little things like those eggs there, and you can, because of the relationship to the other things, that you can imagine that that's a car, and so on.
Or an olive.
The freedom in drawing is immense. You can do anything with drawing, anything.
Back to where we were.
The plug. So at this point, now we're into the early 70s. I mean, starting in the 60s, you really did start to, as we showed in the exhibition here in 75, make the work in thematic threads. And there were certain themes that began to emerge in many different media, many different scales, the plug, the clothespin, the typewriter eraser. Can you talk a bit about those families of objects?
Yes, of course, they were made in different scales and different materials. You see here, there's a canvas on the right, and you see the vinyl on the left. I believe this is when they were being shown here.
Yes, this is
museum.
the Walker in 75. Yeah.
This was at the Walker. And there were categories. I mean, the typewriter was vinyl and also canvas and so on. And there was a kind of a pattern that came along, and that this went on to the end of the 60s. Most of the stuff was done in 66, 67, 68, the soft work and so on. And then that sort of ran out, and it was succeeded by my coming into contact with factory steel and the possibility of creating things with the help of workers, creating things in metal. And that happened around the end of the 60s and became the theme of the following years. This is the first example of a metal sculpture which was placed in the Beinecke Plaza at Yale University, a very sensitive spot outside the president's office in front of the War Memorial. And this was done in '69 when there was a lot of tension in the air about war, and this looks in very good shape, but it didn't take very long before people started to dismantle it and draw all over it and so on, and so it had to be moved to another spot. But this is done, most of it is metal, the tip is plastic, and then the wheels are wood, but this was the first step into large-scale metal works.
And it's the end. We're looking at the end of the '60s here. This
is the end of the
1969.
'60s, yeah. Mm-hmm. This was put up in the middle of '69, and that was then came the exhibition with the MoMA and so on. That was the end of the '60s.
You started in the early '50s as a journalist, and then you were like writing was besides your artistic practice always something you were very involved with. You wrote poems in the late '50s. You wrote this famous statement which you will read later on. I am for an art, and you wrote notes while working, like you had a typewriter on a basement in your studio, and like there are about 10,000 pages, just notes within the '60s, which we made a selection of and published it recently. Maybe tell us a little bit about your practice of writing in the '60s.
Yes, does anyone know what a typewriter is? This one is circa 1927, I think. Anyway, it's a lot of fun to use. It makes a lot of noise and click clacks and stuff like that. You can have a lot of fun with it, and that's because when I used to learn I learned the typewriter in my father's office, and when the office was closed on Sundays, I would go down and use the typewriters and so on. So they became a way of expressing myself, just because they're very tangible. These old typewriters, you had to push really hard to get anything happening. It's not like you could just touch it now, but you had to really push, So it was a sort of an exercise. And as Achim says, there are many, many versions of the notes and the writing and so on, because I really wanted to be a writer very much, and I had to decide at a certain point that I was probably better suited for drawing than writing, because I could not really, I could write poems and I could write short sentences, but I could not write longer things. And I could also perhaps write plays and so on, but I did want very much to be a writer, yes.
Would you like to share some of that early writing with us now?
We have some of this, some evidence of that here, and I've been asked to read it. Whoa.
That was me, I'm sorry.
Yeah. So I said I arrived in New York in 1956. And while searching for a place to live and work, I made collages and also wrote numerous poems, which I gathered under the titles Fear of New York and Violent Landscapes. So I'm going to read you a few of them. An elbow expands in the raggy night. 12 bleats of a tom make bricks in the quiet. All paw is the town. Hairy back is the thought of a closed room, Spittleful is the merciful moon. Have mercy on fur and milky eyes, and lean off-all banqueters with their cane legs and bleeding brown houses. Full blue, nose-enchanted purchaser of wind, knower of birds not even seen, blossoms not yet imagined, old gray hearts posing as rocks, and turtles who have eaten their way into man's deepest handkerchiefs. A coaster in the name of a candle's beard, a little rubber centavo for my friend the spider. What, not so much as a pill for my hungry missing leg? I know a rag who will vengeance me, who knows a stick, who knows a box, who knows someone very personally who'll bring it all crashing down. Mirrors, polish up your annihilations. Instruct metal in ambiguity. There is an order standing for revolvers paneled with invisibility. A mouth is loose. Victims have seen themselves. The countryside is afloat with doubles. If one could but skill oneself conditionally in the deep prune life lived by stripes at the radio center of a month's numeral, eviscerate a cloudy tuba, let a wood ghost pass for iron in the ochre depths, slide by as a can full of wild scratches, mess up a tree by colliding it with tornadic, tack-sprinkled, glass-raping, bellied-out, storming biplanes. Our crimes were slight, many things we did not even intend. We mated a ghost to a frog and produced a city. We twisted death's neon ears and sank a ship. All were saved because we wanted it that way. We filled a saxophone with blood and listened to its sentimental melodies. A hill asked to be moved. We moved it. The train should have known better. They were small things on the face of a small planet, little dust things. How many million eggs are cracked today, do you suppose? These ill numerals will never do, an alphabet in crutches. Something new must be imagined to replace hungry cylinders always firing, firing, firing. To everything, silence is the best response. To the yawn of day which wishes to move, to the burp of noon and all the corpses scattered like jacks on sun-raped historical concrete. Time is the fatal owl, the final sponge, clasping, severing embrace, the laugh, the limit, and us here with our dog noses watching the gum move up and down. Those are some poems. So I wanted to read this as a description of a show that I wanted to make, of which you saw some of the pictures. The show will consist of an epic construction in the form of a street and drawings, small sculptures and constructions also having to do with the street. The material will be mostly paper and wood, glued paper, torn paper, paper over wire on wooden frames, paper hanging down, paper jumping up, paper lying, etc., etc. The scale will vary from heroic to very, very small. In the street, there will be suspended figures, standing figures, lying figures, projecting figures, falling figures, running figures, etc., etc. There will be figures on the walls, figures on the floor, and a sky made of words and cries. There will be signs of various sorts, marquees, street signs, etc., and various sorts of metamorphosed objects, cigar butts, houses, towers, cars, medals, etc., etc. There will be faces in windows and free faces, hanging heads and many heads. There will be men and women and heroes and bums and children and drunks and cripples and street chicks and boxers and walkers and sitters and spitters and trucks and cars and bikes and manholes and stoplights and shadows and cats and doggies and bright light and darkness, fires and collisions and cockroaches and mornings and evenings and guns and newspapers and pissers and cops and mammagangers and a lot more, etc., etc. Then, in the latter part of 1960, the work shifted from line, which is what the store, or rather the street mostly was. It shifted from line to color, and I began to imagine ways of setting paint free. Painting, which has slept so long in its gold crypts, in its glass graves, is asked out to go for a swim, is given a cigarette, a bottle of beer. Its hair is rumpled, is given a shove and tripped, is taught to laugh, is given clothes of all kinds, goes for a ride on a bike, finds a girl in a cab and feels her up, goes flying, goes driving at 100 miles per hour. Shy at first, soon all its dreams are realized, is stripped from its cross, straightened out, is given exercise to bring back its tired muscles, tonics to get the red back in its cheeks. Who all its life had wished to be is given the chance to be a handkerchief, to go from hand to hand, from nose to nose, and in and out of pockets, over foreheads, into eyes and ears, around one set of lips and another, to be dropped and washed in a machine and on a line to dry flapping in the wind. Who all its life had wished to be is given the chance to be a flag, carried in the breeze up and down streets, planted on car fenders going fast, whistling in 1,000 parts over a gasoline station, lazily lying on a coffin, pleased to catch the earth thrown on it, at half-mast for some famous person, lofty on a patriotic day, put away in a drawer at night, nicely folded, wounded or dissolving in battle, decaying in the mast of a ship crossing the ocean. To be a shirt, a tie, a pair of pants, a suit of clothes, going somewhere on someone, getting rumpled while dancing, having a drink spilled on it, taken off and hung up, sent to the cleaners, drawn on a body, catching hair, slicing over fingers, pressing ears. Bolder and bolder, painting becomes anything it wants to be. A hamburger, an ice cream cone, a newspaper, a sewing machine, a bicycle. Impossible, inexhaustible painting. So in the spring of 1961, the following statement, the statement I just read, was expanded to the following statement, which is a sort of ode to the use of materials around you, and a kind of manifesto of the time when painting was, or art in general, was shifting from the inside to the outside. It's called I Am For, and there have been some suggestions that it should be changed to I Was For. However, I'm going to read it as I am for. I am for an art that is political, erotical, mystical, that does something other than sit on its ass in a museum. I am for an art that grows up not knowing it is art at all, an art given the chance of having a starting point of zero. I am for an art that embroils itself with the everyday crap and still comes out on top. I am for an art that imitates the human, that is comic if necessary, or violent, or whatever is necessary. I am for an art that takes its form from the lines of life itself, that twists and extends and accumulates and spits and drips and is heavy and coarse and blunt and sweet and stupid as life itself. I am for an artist who vanishes, turning up in a white cap, painting signs or hallways. I am for an art that comes out of a chimney like black hair and scatters in the sky. I am for an art that spills out of an old man's purse when he has bounced off a passing fender. I am for the art out of a doggy's mouth, falling 5 stories from the roof. I am for the art that a kid licks after peeling away the wrapper. I am for an art that joggles like everyone's knees when the bus traverses an excavation. I am for art that is smoked like a cigarette, smells like a pair of shoes. I am for art that flaps like a flag or helps blow noses like a handkerchief. I am for an art that is put on and taken off like pants, which develops holes like socks, which is eaten like a piece of pie or abandoned with great contempt like a piece of shit. I am for art covered with bandages. I am for art that limps and rolls and runs and jumps. I am for art that comes in a can and washes up on the shore. I am for art that coils and grunts like a wrestler. I am for art that sheds hair. I'm for art that you could sit on. I'm for the art you could pick your nose with or stub your toes on. I'm for an art from a pocket, from deep channels of the ear, from the edge of a knife, from the corners of the mouth, stuck in the eye, or worn on the wrist. I am for an art under the skirts and the art of pinching cockroaches. I am for the art of conversation between the sidewalk and a blind man's metal stick. I am for the art that grows in a pot that comes down out of the skies at night like lightning, that hides in the clouds and growls. I am for art that is flipped on and off with a switch. I am for art that unfolds like a map that you can squeeze like your sweetie's arm or kiss like a pet dog, which expands and squeaks like an accordion, which you can spill your dinner on like an old tablecloth. I am for an art that you can hammer with, stitch with, sew with, paste with, file with. I am for an art that tells you the time of day or where such and such a street is. I am for an art that helps old ladies across the street. I am for the art of the washing machine. I am for the art of a government check. I am for the art of last war's raincoat. I am for the art that comes up in fogs from sewer holes in winter. I am for the art that splits when you step on a frozen puddle. I am for the worm's art inside the apple. I am for the art of sweat that develops between crossed legs. I am for the art of neck hair and cake teacups, for the art between the tines of restaurant forks, for the odor of boiling dishwater. I am for the art of sailing on Sunday and the art of red and white gasoline pumps. I am for the art of bright blue factory columns and blinking biscuit signs. I am for the art of cheap plaster and enamel. I am for the art of worn marble and smashed slate. I am for the art of rolling cobblestones and sliding sand. I am for the art of slag and black coal. I am for the art of dead birds. I am for the art of scratching in the asphalt, daubing at the walls. I am for the art of bending and kicking metal and breaking glass and pulling at things to make them fall down. I am for the art of punching in skin knees and sat on bananas. I am for the art of kid smells. I am for the art of mama babble. I am for the art of bar babble, toothpicking. I'm also for the art of coughing. It may not be possible to go much further. Maybe we'll return to this later.
Return to it later?
Yes, let's return to it later. I'll take a deep breath and I'll see what I'm for later. Yeah.
Thank you, Claes.
Thank you very much. It was incredible.
We wanted to insert the moment of reading into this larger discussion of the career, and to begin where we left off with this discussion of your move in the late 60s into metal and large objects, and the introduction of the geometric mouse, which are you ready to say a few words about this?
Now, the geometric mouse was the first large steel object, and it was based on paper I had cut out, and it's intended to be not a soft mouse, but a hard mouse, and an intellectual mouse, let's say, as opposed to other mice that are around, which are soft and sweet and cuddly. And you can see it has 2 eyes, and then from the eyes there are some chains that lead to what I think of as tears. And you could see this is what I call the classical position. You could see that you could say that the mouse is sort of half asleep here, and you could close its eyes and make it more asleep, and or open it and whatever. Those are the things you could do. And in some of the other versions of it, because I did several, you can also change the position of the ears and so on, and the nose, and you'll see that upstairs when you go later on, how it can be changed into different situations. But this was the first of the steel works.
But you might also say that it's self-portrait. Isn't Mickey Mouse born in the same year, 29?
I never heard of Mickey Mouse. I don't know who that is. This is Geometric Mouse.
And you've spoken about the geometric mouse and its relationship to the film camera and other associations that come to mind.
It's kind of based on the form of the early film camera, which had these wheels on the top, and then it had a square box, and then it photographed it.
So was the creation of this mouse, did you call him a character, or him, or it? Was it a reaction in some way to minimalism, to what was happening in '69 with other art forms?
No, I think this was this has a minimalistic quality, but the mouse had been played with for some time, and I had versions of the mouse earlier. And some of them were soft and so on. It was. I think I wanted to find something very, very specific and clear, which would symbolize, as I say, in the intellectual approach to the subject. And this one went through many changes, and it was also tried as a building, and it was tried as a flag and all kinds of things. And finally, I settled on this form. And as you walk around it, it changes in many ways, and I've made now at this point I've made hundreds of these in different scales, and I'm still making them. And my wife said, "Absolutely no more mice," she said, and she sent them all off to the Menil collection. So if you want to see a lot of mice, you could see them down there.
You're exterminated. But the mouse evolved into its own architecture.
Right, and then then things changed, and the mouse became the storage space and the museum for all kinds of objects that I had collected over the years, from things that were simply given to me, or things that were parts of works that that had then been finished in larger scale and so on. So it's a collection of all kinds of small objects, and really objects that have a potentially metamorphic character to them, like this strange dog here and so on.
So the first time I visited your studio, I remember being struck by the shelves. The studio is filled with shelves, which are filled with objects and small sculptures and things that you've collected and like to have on view. Can you speak a bit about that process of accumulating that happens in your day-to-day?
Well, I mean,
studio
everybody
life?
realizes that things come to you, and people leave things, and you pick up things and so on, and it's just a matter of focusing on that. And as I said, a lot of them are little studies for larger works, and you can see there are 3 pieces there that are studies for a knäckebröd, which is a Swedish kind of bread, and this was an early version of that, and then that changed into another form. And then you can see up there a cigarette butt, an early stage of a cigarette butt on the left, which of course changed into a work that you could see upstairs and so on. And then there were just crazy things, absolutely insane little things that you'd find in a store, that I wanted to preserve. I wanted to make a parody of a museum, and to pretend that all of these things that you were looking at here were large, and that you were a small thing, a small person wandering among them and seeing them in these different scales.
Who's the curator?
Well, the curator, the director, when it was first made, was Casper Koenig. And because the first showing was at the Documenta exhibition in Kassel. And he and I worked on putting them all together, and we cataloged them and gave them titles and so on. And a few years later then, when I was with Kosher, she said, let's make this into a freestanding museum, because at that time it was simply an enclosed area. And so with the help of the Chicago, the Chicago Gallery, what's it called?
The Contemporary Art Museum.
Contemporary Art Museum in Chicago, and some money from the government, we realized this, what you just saw, the building and this interior. And that became a traveling exhibition.
And museums tend to expand.
Yes, and
As-
at that time we also added this ray gun wing, in which you see all of these variations of the right angle. And these are the things that you find when you walk down the street. If you keep your eyes down, you'll see things that are irresistible, and you have to take them home, right? So it's better to have them all in one particular shape, that, otherwise it gets too complicated. But they can be large, they can be small, and they can be made of anything. And that's what's in the ray gun wing. But they're carefully selected. And if someone finds something like that, they have to come to me, and I have to certify that it is a ray gun.
So at MoMA, one of the pleasures of the grand amount of space they had for these objects was the chance to see the bird's eye view of the Mouse Museum and Ray Gun Wing. So this was this past spring. And of course, they are the silhouettes of the mouse and the ray gun, the right angle.
So there the mouse came into a very special, respectable situation. It's asleep, though.
It is sleeping.
Yeah.
So the move from projects like the lipstick into the larger scale projects, the urban projects, I know you'd like to talk a bit about that trajectory in the work and how the 60s led to this this very active urban activity.
Well, I mean, I'd made a lot of drawings, such as the one you saw of the Good Humor Bar, showing an object in large scale, but those I considered to be fantasies. But now the opportunity had come to make these into real pieces because of the use of steel and the availability of factories that were dedicated, as the Lippincott factory was, to making large-scale art. And this was the first civic monument, which was installed in Philadelphia. And it's obviously a clothespin, and it's a few other things too. This was in 1976, which was the bicentennial. You could see the 7.6 there in the aluminum, or rather the steel forms that bind the two together. It was also a play on the sculpture by Brancusi of two figures hugging one another, which is a prominent piece in the Philadelphia Museum. But basically, it was itself, and it's much more graceful than a clothespin. It's not that a clothespin has been copied exactly. This clothespin has been redesigned, and it's intended to play along with the skyscrapers that stand around it. And so when you go there, you'll see it against all these different skyscrapers, and it seems to change shape And it's really, I was very happy with it. This was the first one. This was the second one, which was built for Chicago. It's called the Bat Column. And as you can see, it's actually open. It's not a solid. It's open, and the light shines through it. And it's located on the west side of Chicago. And again, it's having this interplay with skyscrapers.
And when you've been working in an urban context, I know you and Kosha thought a lot about the city itself, about the site, about the associations that came to mind. Of course, in Chicago, you spent most of your youth there. How does that process work when you're thinking about a specific city and a specific image and object?
Well, that's what these are all based on on something that we saw in a place, and we developed. The Bat Column has really, well, if you know Chicago, it's really a lot of things sticking up in the air, on a flat ground. It has had a cemetery appearance, and we wanted to relate to that. And Kosha said also that she wanted the color to be specifically gray, because she felt that was a color that characterized the buildings and the surroundings in Chicago. And so it became that. This is in Las Vegas. It's an upside-down flashlight, obviously, and it's turned on. Originally, it was turned the other way, and the light was shining up, but that was my idea. And Kosha said, well, look, that's all that lights do in Las Vegas. They all shine up in the air, you know. And we want to do something different. So we're going to do one that is standing on its light. So that's how this came about. The flashlight is turned upside down, and the light is at the bottom. This is at the Documenta, Castle Documenta, in, I guess it was 81, 82, and it's called the Spitzhacke. And if you stand over by the blue Spitzhacke and you look that way, you'll see there's a long line, and you could draw a straight line from that point to the top of a hill outside the city. And on top of that hill is a statue of Hercules. And Hercules is holding in his hand a big sledgehammer. And this one sort of plays with that, the idea that the hammer was thrown from that point and landed here. This is in Freiburg, in Breisgau in Germany, and it's on the campus of the university there. And we wanted to make a fountain, but this is a fountain that doesn't do very much. It's to be seen, and it just trickles a little bit on the thing there, as if it's just been turned off. And the rest of the time it's spent just rolling through the air there. And people like to sit on it and climb on it. Of course, that happens with all outdoor sculptures. One has to get used to that. You can't chase them off. This is Kosha and I with the model, which you'll see upstairs, of I never can think of the name of it. What's it called?
Spoonbridge and Cherry.
Okay.
We'll talk about it more. You'll see something more in a minute.
Claes has a surprise at the end about this.
Now this is a work that was executed with Frank Gehry, the architect, and this is in Venice, California. Frank had designed this building, which had two parts to it. You can see they're very different, and he needed something to join the parts, which was also different. And these binoculars, I had made a pair of binoculars for a performance, and Frank had them on his desk, and he suddenly realized that he could join these two with that. And so after a great deal of trouble and money, that's what happened. It's now the headquarters of the Google, I think.
That,
Yeah, Google Foundation. This is Barcelona, And it was done for the World's Fair in Barcelona some years ago. And you could see that it's being taken advantage of. People are sunning themselves and so on. It's also got more matches that are spread around in the landscape outside of it. This is saw for Tokyo. We were asked to make this piece. It relates to a big area of stores and things outside of Tokyo, and these stores and buildings are all built in kind of triangular forms, and so we wanted to echo that in the saw, and we also wanted to have a very simple object that looked mysterious in Tokyo, and the Japanese saw does not look like this. So we took this simple saw, American saw, and we stuck it in the site, and it sort of has its own life.
And upstairs we see the saw flag.
Yes, the saw has been used in many ways. It's been used as a flag, that was actually, that saw up there, the yellow and blue, is made from the official colors of the Swedish government. I wrote to the Swedish government and I got them to give me that material so that it would be accurately blue and yellow. And then I made 4 of those saws, and they were hung up for there was a retrospective in Stockholm. So they have a Swedish origin. This is in Milan. It's needle and thread. The needle goes down and the thread bunches up, and then not so far away it comes up in another sculpture, which is the end of it. I don't know if we have a slide of that, but this is no, we don't have it. This is in Cologne, and Cologne, as you know, if you've been there, is full of churches and triangular forms sticking up in the air, and since this was one of our favorite subjects, the inverted ice cream cone, we offered them this, and there was some complaint because they said we were making fun of that church down there, but that's not true. It was simply, we were just, responding to the forms that we saw. This is Cupid's Span, and it's in San Francisco, obviously. That's the Oakland Bridge. And it's shooting the arrow into the earth. And it's a place where people like to gather after they got married. You see them there on Saturdays. San Francisco likes to think of itself as the place of love. And they have advertisements saying, "Welcome to San Francisco, the city of love," and things like that. So that plays into this. And we got to know the mayor pretty well, and we talked about this a lot. And so this is based on that concept. And this is the most recent piece. It's located in Philadelphia, just off Broad Street. That's the City Hall in the back. And on the right, you have a famous library, the Furness Library, rather on the left of the paintbrush. And on the right side, you have a school, the Pennsylvania Academy. And there's a space in between, which they were converting to a garden. And I was commissioned to put something there, and this is what I chose. It's an old-fashioned paintbrush because these people this is the academy, and they haven't all turned away from brushes and carving and things of that sort to show only things they find on the street. So anyway, this is it's illuminated. It's got two places. It's in that point there of the paint that's dropped on the ground, and then there's more. The tip is illuminated too, and the idea is to suggest the gesture of it going up like that.
I think you have one more image. Well, just to segue into what is the
25th anniversary of the Minneapolis Sculpture Garden, Claes has actually chosen some film for us to view. I don't know if you want to finish your I'm for an Art, or
Well,
if you would
you
like
know,
to
I
watch
tell
the
you,
film first.
that goes on forever.
It's an endurance piece.
Yes.
Yes, okay.
And you can actually find it printed,
Okay,
and you can take it home.
okay. It's a souvenir.
Yes, a souvenir.
All right.
But you got the general idea.
Absolutely.
So,
It's on the cover, like inside the cover of the catalog.
we should say that it's inside the cover of the catalog. The entire piece is printed. Hiding. It's
Yes.
hiding there, yes.
So in his archives, Claes put together some clips of film for us to watch at the end, and then we'll, when the lights come back on, we'll take your questions and hear what Claes has to say after that. Do I just forward to the film? Okay.
Do we turn off the lights, or do we?
Do I do anything? He'll do that. Can we cut the stage lights?
There we go.
Thank you.
Kosha, this is the project in Denver. It's a housing complex, and it needs a bridge to a little park.
You mean this is a public park?
Yeah.
And this is the highway?
Big boulevard.
Is there a lot of traffic?
Lots of traffic,
Yes.
yes. Comes under the bridge and around here.
Is this a housing complex? I mean, who are
Yeah,
living there?
business and people living there. And they have to get across this bridge into the park so they can get over to a shopping center on the other side. And I was thinking that, I think the spoon would be perfect. The spoon has always wanted to be a bridge.
Now here, look at this.
Oh, here's a spoon.
Yeah, it has a thicker edge, which is better as a wall on the bridge.
You need an edge, a thick
Yeah.
edge, yeah.
And the addition.
Oh, a cherry.
You like this?
That's very grand. It's very sculptural.
Also, it has two parts.
It's a nice equilibrium too, Kosha.
Yeah.
Is that all you needed? Okay. All right. Well, that's really stuck. Oh, we really stuck together on that one.
It's a very good symbol of collaboration, this particular sculpture. You could say that the spoon, which had been a very formalistic piece for years in my work, represented the form part, and the cherry, which is something introduced into the work by Kosher, represents the content. That's also echoed in the colors. Form you tend to think of as not having a particular color. It's gray or black or white and so on. But content has color. It has significance. So you can see the difference very clearly. You could say that I'm the spoon and she's the cherry, or you could.
But maybe it's vice versa.
Well, I was going to say that we don't like to confine ourselves to roles. Like we don't like to say, well, a woman thinks that way, a man thinks that way. Insofar as symbolism goes, you could say that this symbolizes our working together. The proposal began with a plan that the Walker had for a garden with an axis. And at the end of the axis, there was to be a sculpture which would be a focus of this axis. And at the same time, there had to be a sculpture that didn't dominate the area down here too much, because it's going to be an area with other sculptures. And so those two factors were very important in formulating the concept of a spoon, which is a horizontal form, and the cherry, which is a dramatic form that attracts the attention of the viewer. Well, the location of it at this point, it's the level where it's sitting. It's all down. It steps down. See?
That's what gives me the feeling that it is like Versailles.
Yeah.
Huh? I can't believe it.
How are you?
Fine.
Oh, nice to see you.
Good to
Welcome.
see you.
Hi.
It's really.
You're pleased?
Here we have.
Well,
we're
we
approaching
haven't
it.
even
We're pretending that we're
approached
Louis
it.
the 14th. Louis
Yeah,
the
at
15th.
least. At least. Isn't it something?
Yeah, it's really.
Yeah, well, it's... So you feel a little better now, Petra?
Absolutely.
Good.
Seeing this makes me feel much better.
One question. Why not a fork?
Why not a fork?
I'll tell you why, because, well, there it comes. Why not a fork? Because we're dealing with a lake, and the lake is like a soup bowl. There's something aggressive slightly about a fork, and it's the form of a spoon is very inclusive. It's a different kind of thing.
But it's funny, if you ask someone, what do you like best, fork, knife, or spoon? I think it says something about a character.
The spoon is a very maternal image, I think. It's a very enclosing, egg-like image.
Kind of.
And the fork to me is an aggressive, grasping image.
A fork selects, and a fork is active. I like a fork too. Depends on my mood, really. I remember in the Netherlands, I would always walk in the parks, and there would be a lot of linden trees, and there were these seeds, and they would drop off the trees at certain points, and I would pick them up, and the children would put them on their nose. They would stick on their nose, and it has a very specific shape. It has two long ends, which are very organic and nicely rounded. And so I propose to have the pond in that form.
It hasn't any precision. It's very irritating at this point because nothing is precise. And in the end, it'll be very precise, especially the shape, we hope.
The cherry is high up on the spoon, and when you look from the museum down, you will see something red at the end of the garden, and hopefully that guides you into the end. Because the garden is laid out very formalistically in squares, and the only opening to the end of the garden itself is the axis, the path you come down. And so the spoon is placed in such a way that you will see the cherry and the prow, which is like a ship sticking up. And we hope that people like it and want to come down. Yes.
Elegant arabesque, strong drawings. It's a big drawing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a drawing in space.
It's a drawing. It's a drawing.
And that Stalin church behind it is...
Isn't it nice?
It's so
Isn't that nice?
vertical, yeah.
Claes's work, as you are beginning to gather, if you hadn't earlier, deals with the transformation of common objects, finding their aesthetic, their abstract qualities, their psychological qualities, and in the process, he subtly transforms them. He enlarges them. Sometimes he does them in sort of hard shapes, sometimes as soft sculptures. And over the years, he's developed this extraordinary kind of repertoire, this iconography. If you're perhaps not aware of some of the things that they've done, they have created, for example, a marvelous upside-down flashlight in Arizona. They have done a magnificent umbrella in Des Moines, the marvelous bat column in Chicago, and we can go on.
So we formally declare the Spoon Bridge to be open and afloat and aloft. The other thing one should look for is connection and relation between one thing and another. Just by chance, one thing will pick up another thing. And that brings a kind of harmony or echoes through the landscape. The use of the object and the use of scale is a device to create a type of sculpture, so that the end result is really not a large spoon. It just happens to have that name. It's a sculpture. And it certainly is true that what you aim for is a transformation of the original into something which can challenge the thing known as a sculpture. See, our work is full of suggestions, and what we hope is that people pick up suggestions and make them into their own ideas and develop them. That way, a work, when it's placed into a particular place like this, acquires all kinds of meanings that we don't even know about. People bring it out of the work.
Most grown-ups, you wouldn't believe it, most grown-ups were once children. No, but they forget it, that's the problem. And so the sculpture is there to remind them. Well, it works in the sixth sense, your sense of balance. And so to have it, a lot of the grown-ups have forgotten how to swing and work with their bodies, No, it just looks exquisite, but it does look inedible. The shine on it is just gorgeous. I think that they really like the idea of what's inside of it, the way that those ribs are inside of it. Often the artist is the only person that sees the X-rays, the insides of pieces. But I think that both Kostya and Klaus really like that shipyard experience. I don't know, they didn't tell me, but that's my imagination.
When we finish, I'd still like to keep a certain ambiguity in the work at the end, so people still don't know for sure whether it's a spoon or a sculpture. Because everything we do is designed to keep things moving and alive. And that's what the water running over the cherry does, and that's what the line of the spoon does, and the reflection of the water. But it also takes place in the realm of ideas. And so we like to keep ideas moving so that nothing stops in one place. It's always moving to something else. So someone will say, oh, that's a spoon, and the other person will say, don't be silly, that's a sculpture, and so on.
Nice to see that. So we'd like to open the floor to a few questions. And we have, I believe, mics roving for those of you who have them.
You'll have to spot them, I can't.
You'll have to spot them, yes.
Yeah.
Maybe we can bring the stage lights down just a bit.
They should hold up cherries. You'll have to do the calling.
Okay.
This isn't a question, but it's an observation. I took Elund Wiklund around the sculpture park. She's the longtime illustrator for Astrid Lindgren. And when she came out of the walker and saw the cherry, she said, Pippi Longstrump would have liked that.
I'm sure.
Another question?
Going back to your 60s work, it seemed like you were really high. And I mean that in the sense of not drug-related, but you used the term illumination, that you were illuminated and in a state of sort of being very receptive to all objects being art. And I'm wondering in your process, and this goes throughout your career, I'm wondering how you choose what it is you want to manifest. Why? Because if everything is around you, everything is alive, everything is exciting, what makes you want to bring certain objects into manifestation? And then what are your keys to actually manifesting something? Everybody's got good ideas. What are your secrets of manifestation?
Well, I think that many times objects look like other things. And there is a There's a sexual factor. Perhaps an object looks sexy, you know, or suggests something like that. And other than that, objects can sort of insist that they be used. They kind of push themselves on you by repeating themselves and so on. It's very hard to say, you know, how I choose an object, but it would be interesting to go into it and follow, say, one typical object through its stages. And usually the object has been tried for different things. For example, you'll see upstairs that the spoon was once suggested as a substitute for Navy Pier in Chicago, as a large thing going out into the lake. And so many of the objects have a history of being nearly chosen for something else and then finally winding up in the thing that's right for it.
You mentioned that Patty Muha did a lot of the stitching on your soft objects, and I was actually particularly looking at that when I toured the exhibit before our talk today, and it's absolutely beautiful. It's so even. Could you just talk a little bit about, did she have a big industrial machine, and how did she accomplish that?
Well, we had in the beginning we just had an ordinary machine, but when we got into the large works, we got industrial machinery, and she had a great gift for sewing, and we always would sew, as I think I mentioned earlier, we sew a practice version, because vinyl is, you can't puncture vinyl twice. You've got to make only one hole in the vinyl. And so you have to know exactly how to run the vinyl through the machine. So she would practice on these canvas versions until she got just the right thing. And I have tried sewing, and it doesn't work for me at all. And I was really dependent on that. And she was a wonderful partner. And she also, as you know, played a lot of parts in the happenings and so on. And I think to be with another person, you kind of have to be doing something together. It means that means a lot to me, and that was true also with Koshes. So, yes, indeed, Patty was a great seamstress. Is a great seamstress. Yes.
I have two questions. Who are some of your favorite artists, either past or very current? And then also, what do you like to eat?
What do I like to do?
No, what do you like to eat? You know, because food is such a big part of your work.
Well, I'm fairly conservative about eating.
Don't forget about the artists. We want to know who you like too.
Oh, you want to know my favorite artist?
Food and artists.
Well, there's so many artists, you know, and they all do kind of different things, and it's very hard to choose one and say that's the one. But I mean, if you were twisting my arm or something, you know, perhaps I'd have to say something, and maybe I'd say, well, I wouldn't always say this, but maybe I'd say René Magritte, for example. And but that's just one kind of art. I mean, there's so many different kinds of art. I guess there's going to be a Magritte show in New York in a few days, and it'll be early work of Magritte, and it'll be fun. And what I like about him is he made the point very clear that the object was, what he was rendering was not the object, but a picture of the object, or a drawing of the object. And his famous painting, Ceci n'est pas une pipe, this is not a pipe, which is a beautiful painting of a pipe. It means a lot to me, because I am not an artist of found objects. I don't say, look, locate something and don't touch it and change it, the way maybe Duchamp might have done. But I like to change things.
My question is, what is the balance between the work leading you and you leading the work?
Did you say leading?
Yes.
Well, I think that changes all the time. I do like to be in charge. And if I'm not in charge, I don't think I can claim the object. So usually, usually things go through a lot of changes when they're being made, and they make some decision that is usually my decision.
Why was it art that you were interested in?
Could I have that again?
Why was it art that you were interested in?
Oh, well, that's because I think I mentioned that I was good at drawing, you know, and I think that if you're good at something, you should try to follow that. And besides which, I do like art. I'm very involved with touch and seeing. And I like very much to see beautiful things, and I also like to touch beautiful things. And both of that makes art, you know, both of them together.
Many people talk about the whimsical quality of your work. There's also a very woebegone kind of feeling when they're isolated and taken out of their context. In 1965, I think you wanted to make a large sculpture in Central Park, the teddy bear, for example, a woebegone kind of object. And I'm wondering what you think about contemporary work like Jeff Koons's Puppy in Rockefeller Plaza, and just the work that I think is very obviously influenced by your work.
Yes, I think you're right about that.
It's pretty obvious.
And yet it has a different quality. That's well, it's very. Could you state that again? Perhaps it's some part about it that I missed a few things there.
The woebegone quality.
Yeah, the woebegone quality. Oh yes, about the bear. See, the bear was the bear was a project that could never have been done because it was on such a large scale, and so that was among the proposed colossal monuments, so-called. But there was an idea expressed in having this sad bear sitting up at the other end of the park. And that idea had to do with the division of Manhattan into rich and poor. And the further up you go on Manhattan, the less wealthy people get, and so on. So it had something to do with that. And it is a. I would like to have done a teddy bear. What's his name? Who did a teddy bear? The guy put it in front of the Mies van der Rohe building. We were just talking about well, anyway.
Jeff Koons.
No, Jeff Koons is the puppy in Rockefeller Plaza.
We were talking about earlier.
Jeff Koons.
No, not Jeff Koons. The German guy.
Oh, Urs Fischer.
Urs Fischer. Urs Fischer made a bear, or he had a bear made, and he put it on Park Avenue. And that sort of hurt me, because I would really have liked to have done a teddy bear somewhere, but
it's a wonderful drawing. But when you talk
the drawing
about
is very good, and the drawing has a sense of space that's very nice. And so I'm really quite happy with the drawing, and that's enough for me, even though I love teddy bears.
But when you talk about your artistic philosophy and then you compare it with something like Jeff Koons saying, well, I'm just giving the public what they want, it seems to be quite different. I just wondered if you ever ran into him or ever talked to any of these contemporary artists that...
Well, I've only met him once. I was sitting at a table in, I think it was the Whitney was a party, and this fellow came and slid up next to me in a chair, and he said, I'm Jeff Koons. And I said, I'm very glad to meet you. And then he went away. But I admire him, and I think he's quite different. You know, he really is. I do. I admire him.
One to two more questions?
Food? Oh. What was that, a question about what food I like? Oh. Well, I don't know. I was in the restaurant this morning in the hotel, and I said, I want some eggs, fried, and they're white, and he said, I don't understand what you're saying. He said, can you describe it a little better? I said, let me think. He said, would they be sunny side up? I said, yes, that's what they are. It's sunny side up. I just had failure of language there. But I do like fried eggs. Yeah.
Were either of your parents artistic?
What?
Were your parents artistic, is the question.
What was it?
Were your parents artistic, was the question.
Were the parents artistic? Well, my mother did quite a lot of drawings and works that we have collected and presented to the Swedish Institute in Philadelphia. And she was quite busy, and she loved to draw. And they were all abstract and sort of geometrical, but they were quite nice. My father was not involved in art, no, but he had a great sense of humor and was very smart and had a very nice writing hand. Of course, writing is also gone out of style, and people don't train themselves to write beautifully anymore, which is a shame. But he had a very nice hand. My mother, too. They both had extremely nice handwriting, which was artistic, I would say.
A final question? Here.
Well, this is related to that. Do you think your Swedish heritage affected your work?
It's hard to say. I haven't spent much time in Sweden. I was. My father was stationed in New York when I was conceived. My mother went to Stockholm so I could be born in Sweden. But we returned then to New York, and I've grown up most of my life in America. My father was eventually assigned to Chicago, and he spent many years there, and that's where I grew up, in Chicago. So I really haven't, I must have some kind of connection, it's in you somewhere, I suppose. But I do speak Swedish. Yeah, jag talar svenska.
Well, Claes, thank you for coming back to the Midwest. Thank you for being with us today. Achim, thank you for being with us. For your amazing show.